Kentucky, South Carolina, and Iowa, and pick up a Democrat-held seat in Alabama. America is listening to Fox News.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Hours Fox News Alert. The Fox News Decision Desk putting Texas, Ohio, Florida, and now Iowa and Montana in President Trump's column in Tuesday's election, projecting Joe Biden winning Minnesota, Arizona, and California. The former vice president telling supporters a short time ago he's confident. Democrats so far have a net gain of 1 in the U.S. Senate, picking up seats in Arizona and Colorado while losing 1 in Alabama. Democrats will also pick up seats and retain control of the House of Representatives.
The majority victory, with a few more seats added, will afford the Speaker opportunities to lead her caucus in defending policies she says are critical to Americans. She said the strategy was to push a health-centered message that would resonate with voters.
Our purpose in this race was to win so that we could protect the Affordable Care Act and that we could crush the virus.
While the Democrats built on their majority, the party did suffer a loss in Florida with Donna Shalala, a former Health and Human Services Secretary under President Bill Clinton, losing her seat to Republican Maria Elvira Salazar. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Voters in California have approved Proposition 22, which will allow ride-hailing services to treat drivers as independent contractors. Just a week after a court ruled they should be considered employees. In Arizona and New Jersey, voters have approved ballot measures to decriminalize the recreational use of marijuana. Louisiana voters approving a resolution that asserts there is no state constitutional right to an abortion. A federal agency Tuesday has stripped the collective bargaining powers of a national union representing more than 450 federal immigration judges that have been a vocal critic of the Trump administration's policies. The Federal Labor Relations Board siding with the Justice Department, saying the immigration judges hold a position that is akin to management and therefore do not have a right to collective bargaining. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
As the island takes a stand against the coronavirus, so do the professionals at Horizon Properties. As a property owner and with the current health scare the island is facing, the last thing you should worry about is collecting rental payments or sending out a repairman to your property. Let Horizon Properties take care of that for you as you remain safe at home. Call Horizon Properties at 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at www.horizonproperties.com. Horizon Properties, always there for you.
Chili's has a dinner deal you can't miss. Enjoy a tasty appetizer, 2 bottomless Coca-Cola beverages, and 2 mouth-watering entrees, all for just $35. Treat yourself to entree options like our fall-off-the-bone baby back ribs, personal fajita with chicken, or the ultimate bacon burger. Chili's, 2 for $35. Available daily from 3 p.m. to closing for patio dining or takeout. Chili's is located on the 2nd floor of the Tuman Sands Plaza. Call 648-7377 to place your takeout order today. With Chili's, you can still savor the moment at home.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Here we are, and I've got something I want to show off here. I got two things I want to show off. First is this badge on my shirt that said, I voted. And the second, I worn this shirt once before, Trump Nation. So I'm an There you go. The battle hymn of the Republic. So I'm an reconstructed Trumpite. Yeah. And I was glancing at TV before the show started. It ain't, as Yogi Berra once upon a time said, it ain't over till it's over. But it's not looking real good for Donald Trump right now. But if Biden should win, that has two effects on me. One, I won't like it. And two, it just increases my burden to carry the conservative message to the entire country through our international radio listeners composed of tall gators all over the world. Let's go straight to Zemi Ikotny. So once again, the Daily News, as per their usual custom, can't run a local editorial even on the day after election. I don't know if that's incompetence, lack of interest, or a combination of the two. So they did what they always do. They ran a editorial by someone named Ziad Munson, who was an associate professor of sociology and chairman of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Lehigh University. In other words, an intellectual. And of course,
we need to know.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Surprise, surprise. And here's the title of what Ziad wrote. Fate of abortion rights won't hinge on Barrett. And he says, here's a reality check for both sides of the abortion issue. The days when the landmark's 1973 Roe versus Wade Supreme Court ruling protected widespread and easy access to abortion, along with the days when overturning Roe might dramatically reduce the number of abortions, are decades in the past, unfortunately. The value of Roe today is not so much practical as it is symbolic. For the pro-choice movement, now, when these guys use the word pro-choice, they're talking about abortion. They don't like the A word because it's too graphic. It tells you what they're really for, instead of some euphemistic, oh, I'm for choice. Well, what do you mean, choice of? I'm completely in favor of women's reproductive rights. Well, that sounds pretty good. If it weren't for women's ability to reproduce, I wouldn't be here. So I can get on the right side of that. And choice, well, you know, it's a free country. Everybody should be able to choose. What do you mean choose? Abortion. As they whisper the A word, abortion. So the value of Roe today is not so much practical as it is symbolic for the pro-choice movement. Roe has become an important public face of reproductive rights and a symbol of women's equality under the law. Women are equal. We know that they're equal because they can kill defenseless, innocent human beings so long as they're in the womb. And if you're in Virginia, the governor of Virginia, even after they've escaped the womb. Like any symbol, the fate of Roe matters to the outlook and morale of those who imbue it with so much meaning. But recognizing its power as a symbol is quite different thing from seeing the future of the legal and political status of abortion hanging on whether it is upheld or overturned. The late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself recognized this. She was a champion of abortion rights, but mindful of the limits of the Roe versus Wade decision. Abortion rights don't hinge on whether a newly appointed justice, Amy Coney Barrett, will overturn Roe, because abortion rights have already been brought to death's door by 1,000 smaller cuts over the past 50 years, delivered by the courts, Congress, state capitals, and the mass media. Those rights were never so wide or well protected as they were in the immediate wake of the Roe versus Wade decision. The history of the abortion debate since 1973 has been, without exception, a history of ever-declining availability and access to safe, legal abortion services. And going on to the end, the battle between pro-choice and pro-life movements. And once again, speaking to this in plain English instead of Orwellian talk, newspeak, the battle between pro-abortion and anti-abortion movements will continue to be fierce because the stakes continue to be extremely high. The victories and defeats will have important, measurable, and long-lasting impacts on both families and our country as a whole. And it will also have an impact on those millions of people who are going to be slaughtered in the womb because of Roe versus Wade. You didn't want to mention that in your article here.
61 million.
Yeah, Mr. Associate Professor of Sociology. The dysfunction of Congress has made the Supreme Court more important than ever in governance, and that for sure is correct. And replacing Ginsburg with Barrett will thus have profound consequences in the years ahead. Even so, the political struggle over abortion has never been about a single Supreme Court decision, and the status of Roe versus Wade today is no exception. And let's get down to what it's really about. It's really about the Supreme Court tossing the concept of federalism in the wastebasket, because matters of reproduction, criminal law, etc., are things that should be decided at the state level, not by a bunch of politicians dressed up in black robes who want to pander to the left. And that's exactly, I have said this so many times, it should be decided in each of the states. And if it were, we wouldn't still be fighting over what we've been fighting over since 1973. So if Roe versus Wade were overturned, the result would be the matter would be controlled by state law, where it belongs. Okay, so much for that. And let's see what I got here. I got somebody in the green room. It's Drive-Through Jack, but Drive-Through is going to wait till I finish the Demi-Cotney, which won't take long because the Post, once again, Post has lost its fastball lately. You know, the Post used to get out there in the mound and throw this whistling fastball, you know, right smack over the center of the plate. It was at least 100-mile-an-hour fastball. But lately, the 100-mile-an-hour fastball has turned into a slow-pitch softball that arcs way up and comes down and just barely makes it across the plate.
T-ball.
Yeah, right. So today their editorial is Democracy Prevailed Over Pandemic Constraints. This is supposed to make your tummy feel warm. Oh, yeah, even with the pandemic, people still went to vote. Smallest turnout in the history of elections, right? Crappiest results, but democracy prevailed. And, of course, the rules of debate, especially nowadays, are the first person who supports his position in a debate by saying the words democracy or democratic wins the debate. I don't like the Electoral College. Well, it's been a function of our government since the very beginning. What's wrong with it? It's anti-democratic. Well, then it must be bad. Okay, no blue stars today. Boy, Jack must really be hungry today. Or maybe he was up late last night watching election results or something like that and threw his timetable off. So, Jack, what drive-through are you calling from today?
I'm calling from home there, Bob. I got up a little late last night, so I couldn't make it to my polling station. So I did whatever every responsible voter should do, is just head to their nearest poll station that was next to them, and that's what I did. And I asked for a provisional ballot, and I cast my vote. So I just wanted to call, and I would like to say that I would like to really congratulate the real winners here, and that's us pro-lifers.
Yeah, you're right, Jack. Yeah. 10 of us now, right? 10 of them.
I'm just going by the Esperanza Project, so I counted like 8, which was good enough for me. But if you want to throw in another 2, that's great.
Yeah. All of the Republicans, right?
Yeah.
And
Joe T.
Talina, and Pito.
Okay, then. So, the Lord works in mysterious ways.
He does indeed.
So we are giving, we have the free will for things, and those that are in the legislature right now, they put up forth how they feel about the right to life. Let's not forget, it's abortion, and it's also euthanasia. It's anything that has to do with life. Embryonic cell research and stuff like that. So the right to life won today. And unfortunately, I'm a gig worker, and I got to be honest with you, Bob. When that PUA, the pandemic unemployment relief came in, that's the first time I ever saw a 5-digit check, that was unencumbered. In other words, I didn't have to pay a lawyer, or I didn't have to pay the government or anything like that. And, seeing that kind of money, and I told you this before, we're from here on out, we're going to be treating money and work differently now. And so, in a sad way, low-wage earners won because they got the PUA. And then, of course, the governor won because when that Care Relief Act money came out for $1,200 per working adult, a letter immediately followed that, claiming that she gave it. And I got the copy of the letter right there. And of course, you might think that the Republicans, capital R party, won. I say in essence they lost because we weren't able to support President Trump. And the real hero, if we ever get out of this economic mess, the real hero that gave back the working people of Guam back more money in their paycheck, which local government took back in the raise of the GRT. So, I think in all, I'm glad that us as pro-lifers wins, like you said, and you said from day one, you need to know what your core values are. And if you are in support of abortion, then that's already you're off the list. But
the litmus test, Jack. Well, thanks a lot for calling and sharing. And you're out of character calling from home. I almost didn't recognize your voice without the echo chamber effect of the drive-through. But glad you called, Jack.
So I just wanted to see what's going to go on with President Trump. Let's hope that he wins. And, whoever wins this election, it's just the start of the road, and it's going to be a hard road. But let's hope that President Trump wins this election. So God bless.
Yeah, thank God we got Tall Tales to help us get through. Yeah. Okay, Jack, thanks for calling. Okay, I got a little traffic here on the website here concerning my reading of the editorial in the Daily News, starting out with Andrew Camacho. We don't appreciate your distortion. We're just trying to restore abortion. It's not a real life that is sliced with a knife. Don't blow it out of proportion. Even Andrew has mastered the... Where's that horn, Jose? Even Andrew rates a horn here, right? Yeah. And then Mike Alvarez comes along and says, should be decided by the woman and her God, not politicians or a government. Well, you're equating a woman with God, apparently, that they're 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So if you bring God into it, life is God's creation. And the end of life is also God's negative creation. What right does a woman have when is it okay for a woman to kill a helpless, innocent person? I'll tell you my answer to that. Never. So, Mike Alvarez, how do you twist that around to a woman having the ability to decide when it's okay and then answering, well, if I feel like it, because the legal constraints have been removed now. So it's just a matter of how the woman feels. You know, I don't feel like doing this. I think I'll get an abortion. Well, what about the child living inside of you? Oh, well, whatever. Where's the doctor's phone number? And then Mike Elfel, and then let's see, Jose Martinez says, actually, let's ask the baby whose life is about to be snuffed. Mike Alvarez says, how do you do that? And then Jose comes back and says, don't kill them. You know, once they're dead, you can't ask them. Very good, Jose. Yeah. The legal fictions that humans are capable of creating to justify the unjustifiable are really something to behold. Yeah. Well, you know, it's women's reproductive rights. Yeah. Okay, let me turn to the card now, and this is what I got on the card. I've got Karens versus Trump. Karens really like Biden, yeah. I've got Kaplan versus the Supreme Court of the United States. I've got losers, and I've got a list of a dozen losers here. Separatists, challengers, abortion, senators with cervixes, McNinch, Action PAC, PDG, Mary Torres, Rory, legacy candidates, Tina Rose Munya Barnes, and election day chaos. So you want to make sure that you stick around for the card. I don't think I'll have time, but if I do, I've got Black Lives Matter versus white coats, which has been on the card for a while, and then Bavakwa versus USA, which is kind of a reprise on losers. So let me start out here with Karens versus Trump. And this is an article from the New York Post. Yeah, the very best newspaper in New York. And since the only other newspaper in New York that anybody pays any attention to is the New York Times, saying that the New York Post is the best newspaper in New York is the classic case of damning the New York Post with faint praise. Yeah. You know, the New York Post broke the story about Biden's laptop. 5 days later, the New York Times came out with its own story about the New York Post story instead of about the laptop. Okay, this is from the New York Post. Majority of voters named Karen favor Biden for president. A majority of likely voters from numerous battleground states named Karen favor Joe Biden to be the next president, according to a new poll. 60% of Karens, a name used as a pejorative for nitpicky, middle-aged white women, are leaning towards Biden, according to a poll released by the New York Times and Siena College. The poll, conducted since September, asked more than 17,000 likely voters from 18 battleground states their preference for president and compiled the results by first names. Karen was among the 10 most common first names of responders. people named Richard responded to the most common name with the heaviest support for President Trump. Hooray for Richards. The results of the poll included 102 first names, each of which account for about 30 respondents. Overall, Donalds gave Trump his widest margin of support, 68%. Those with the same last name as Biden were split even between Trump him and Trump with a 45% support for each. So 45% of the people polled who were named Biden supported Trump. But the real news here is 60% of the Karens backed Biden. It kind of tells you everything you need to know. Okay, next I've got Kaplan versus the Supreme Court. And this picks up on a theme that I have been going over many, many times on this program, and that is that the Supreme Court has gotten way carried away with what its actual mission is. Well, let me take a short break here, and I'll come back to Kaplan versus the Supreme Court.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, so the title of this column here by a guy named David A. Kaplan, and his background is this. Let's see, a former legal affairs editor of Newsweek, so you know what side of the game he's on, is the author of, quote, The Accidental President, How 413 Lawyers, 9 Supreme Court Justices, 5,963,110 Floridians landed George W. Bush in the White House. I've criticized Bush versus Gore myself on many occasions, and I've been very critical of the Supreme Court, referring to it as the upperest branch, knowing that that's bad grammar, but using it for emphasis, because we started out with 2 legislative branches in our government, or 2 houses in our legislative branch, the House of Representatives and the Senate. But then the Supreme Court came along, probably as early as the 1920s, and began to assert itself as a legislature, making laws. And of course, the laws that the Supreme Court make cannot be repealed like the laws that Congress makes. And then the Supreme Court, I guess, got had so much fun with that it later on decided it could amend the Constitution of the United States. And I've talked about Griswold versus Connecticut before. Griswold versus Connecticut was a Supreme Court case that held that a Connecticut law making artificial birth control a crime, possessing it, talking about it, etc., was a violation of the Due Process Clause because it was a, quote, violation of privacy. And I've pointed out many times, you look through the Constitution, and you won't find the word privacy in there anywhere. The Supreme Court just made it up, the right of privacy. And based on that right of privacy, we wound up with Roe versus Wade, and then on to Obergefell versus, what is the guy's name? Obergefell versus Hogan, I think it is. Yeah, the Supreme Court decision that says that states must allow Harry to marry Henry, even though they're the same sex. So that's where the Supreme Court really got out of control. They just made stuff up. Instead of acting as a legal arbiter, they took it upon themselves to engage in social policy. So even this guy on the left is singing the same song that I'm singing. He says, you remember the legal horror show called Bush versus Gore? The Supreme Court couldn't possibly replicate that. But don't underestimate the justice's capacity for self-inflicted wounds. The sequel's being scripted, and it may be worse. 20 years ago, the court stepped in to halt a recount in the disputed 2000 presidential election. Both the Constitution and federal law specifically entrusted Congress to resolve such a deadlock. And I've explained exactly how that works, and I have explained how that worked, why the Supreme Court should have denied jurisdiction and let the process work, but they didn't. But the justices recklessly inserted themselves anyway. The fiercely divided ruling cost the court its legitimacy and hurt the country. It cost the court its legitimacy because here I am criticizing it. Now, there are widespread worries that the court will jump in again, and I keep hearing that all the time. Boy, you know, this lecture is going to be really hotly contested. The Supreme Court's going to get in this. And people think, well, you know, it's really important, and it's election to federal offices, so, well, therefore the Supreme Court ought to get... No. That's not the way our system is designed. President Trump said in late September, wait a minute, let me go back here. Now there are widespread worries that the court will jump in again. Quote, I think this will wind up in the Supreme Court, President Trump said in late September. Having just placed Amy Coney Barrett, the sixth Republican justice on the court, he is evidently thrilled about that prospect. Only two justices remain on the court who were there in 2000, Clarence Thomas and Stephen Breyer. Have they and their fellow justices learned anything from the court's misadventure? One of the biggest myths about the court, born of its continuing gratuitous interventions in contentious issues that should have been left to Congress and the states, my thoughts exactly, is that it had no choice but to meddle. That self-proclaimed textualist Antonin Scalia told an interviewer years after Gore, we were the laughing stock of the world, the world's greatest democracy that couldn't conduct an election. And, you know, I parted ways with Scalia on his treatment of Bush versus Gore, and then he doubled down on Heller versus District of Columbia, which was another bad decision. Now, I know I read the Second Amendment at the beginning of the program every day. I think it was a wrongly decided case. So I suppose you could accuse me of hypocrisy because I always criticize when people embrace the result, even though it was reached in the wrong way. And if that's the case, I'll sign up for it. I do think that citizens ought to have the ability to keep and bear arms, and I think the sanity of our republic depends on it. I just don't find that in an amendment to the Constitution that starts out with the words "a well-regulated militia." And I've mentioned before that Scalia, I think, had eye trouble because if you put him in front of an eye chart and the words on the eye chart were a well-regulated militia, he would have said, I guess I need glasses. I can't read that. Anyhow, going on. Scalia omitted any mention of where in the Constitution he had unearthed a, quote, laughingstock clause that justified the court's intrusion. Good point. On occasion, he had a smugger response when asked about the 5-4 ruling. Quote, "Get over it," he'd say. Justice David Souter, who dissented, never did. So appalled was he about Bush versus Gore. And parenthetically, Ruth Bader Ginsburg got one right. Yeah, even a broken clock, you know. Yeah, if you read Ruth Bader Ginsburg's dissent, she got it right. And it looked like she is as much of a federalist as I am on that one decision. That was an anomaly, of course. The court's docket is discretionary. In other words, they can take what they want. There's nothing that requires them to take any case. The only plausible explanation for the courts taking up Bush versus Gore is institutional arrogance. The belief that justices alone could save the country from a crisis that wasn't a crisis. But the Constitution and a federal statute provide what to do in such instances, even if a president isn't chosen by Inauguration Day. That hubris not only made the justices look like partisans in robes, but also raised the stakes for future court nominations. I've made that point so many times because the Supreme Court now has that legislative power and the ability to amend the Constitution. Political types fight harder for Supreme Court nominations than they do for candidates for the Senate or the House or even the president, because there's more power in the Supreme Court. When the court shuts down a recount, invents an individual's right to bear arms under the Second Amendment, unleashes big money into campaigns, guts voting rights, and sets abortion policy, presidents and senators react accordingly. The storm over Justice Barrett's confirmation is the latest chapter in a story that begins with the justices themselves. I couldn't have said it better, and I've said it so many times. It's the behavior of the Supreme Court that has made these appointments so contentious. Bush versus Gore involved just one state, Florida. This year, that case might look like a picnic. With so many battleground states and with hundreds of lawsuits, no doubt this is the most litigated election ever. Still, elections should be garden variety state matters, even for races for the presidency. State courts should be left to make decisions based on their own state laws and state constitutions. Yet there's plenty of reason to think that some of the justices would be happy to substitute their own judgment. In 2000, the court's logic was that the 14th Amendment's guarantee of, quote, equal protection rendered Florida's system unconstitutional because different counties use different standards to evaluate contested ballots. Never mind that the counties all set out to determine the intent of any given voter. Never mind that George Bush's lawyers had raised the equal protection argument only in passing. Wasn't even their major argument. Why would they do otherwise? There were 3,141 counties in the United States. Most contained multiple municipalities, most of which had separate voting precincts. There were different machines, ballot designs, and instructions. Lines could be short in some neighborhoods, around the block in others. Many of the disparities disproportionately affected black people, the chief intended beneficiaries of the 14th Amendment. Yet the court had never gone near declaring that such variances amounted to constitutional transgressions. In Bush versus Gore, the justices did. Had they finally seen the light when it came to voting inequities? Nope. They were apparently ambivalent enough about their own reasoning that they said the case should not be considered a precedent. Yeah, so you can't cite the Bush versus Gore anymore. No, they said this is a one-off. Yeah. I mean, it was...
They can do that?
Well, they're the Supreme Court. Who's going to tell them they can't? It all goes back to Mr. Justice Robert Jackson, who was one of my old favorites. He was appointed by FDR. But Robert Jackson said, we are not final because we are infallible. We are infallible because we're final. Once the Supreme Court rules, that's it. Nobody can overrule the Supreme Court. And that's the scary part of the whole thing. They were apparently ambivalent enough about their own reasoning that they said the case should not be considered precedent. So maybe the court cooks up some rationale that, lo and behold, again benefits the Republican candidate. Couldn't happen? It already is, as recent rulings from the court underscore. It's true that Chief Justice John Roberts on October 19 surprised us, keeping the court out of the political storm. He split from the other 4 Republican-appointed justices to allow election officials in Pennsylvania to count certain mailed ballots received after the polls close on Election Day. He did so to avoid overruling interpretation of Pennsylvania law by the state's own highest court. That's the way it's supposed to be. Then last week, he sided with fellow Republican-appointed justices to block Wisconsin from counting mailed ballots received after Election Day. His distinction was that in Wisconsin, it was a federal and not a state judge who extended state electoral deadline. Well, I can understand that. And again, in the spirit of federalism, that, the Chief Justice said, wasn't okay. He was the only justice to make that distinction. With Justice Barrett on the court, the Chief Justice doesn't matter anymore. Even without him, the court has 5 other justices appointed by Republicans. The occasionally restrained chief has been the swing justice in the past 2 years. I got to stop here and make my own comment on the Chief Justice John Roberts. Roberts is an institutionalist. My reading is that his main concern is that no matter where the Supreme Court goes, the Supreme Court must come out of it looking good. Now, I can't look inside his head, but maybe that's why he hokied up that reason that the Obamacare penalty was actually a tax, so he could find that it was constitutional, because he doesn't want it to appear that those appointed by Republicans will rule one way and those appointed by Democrats will rule the other way.
Remember that cartoon Felix the Cat? Whenever he got into a fix, he reached into his bag of tricks.
Well, that's the Chief Justice. So his bag of tricks is designed to try to make the U.S. Supreme Court appear to be impartial and fair and not to be partisan, populated by politicians in black robes. The occasionally restrained chief has been the swing justice in the past 2 years. No more. We don't know for sure what Justice Barrett thinks about court interventions in presidential elections, but we do know that she, like John Roberts, went to Florida as a private lawyer in 2000 to assist Bush. Her task, wouldn't you know it, was to make sure Republican voters' mailed absentee ballots got counted. In their opinion last week on Pennsylvania ballots, Neil Gorsuch, Samuel Alito, and Thomas, all appointed by Republicans, didn't bother with the Chief Justice's salami slicing. They seem to indicate that even a state court's enforcement of voting rights under a state constitution would be unacceptable if that enforcement differed from the judgment of a state legislature. Who but the Supreme Court could fix that? Justice Brett Kavanaugh didn't sign that opinion. Instead, he issued his own in the Wisconsin case that actually cited Bush versus Gore. 20 years ago, when he was a private lawyer, he liked the ruling so much that he gave a TV interview on the court steps extolling it. Count them up. At minimum, that's 4 votes ready to repeat the ignominy of Bush versus Gore. Justice Barrett and the rest of them might learn a lesson from Justice Scalia's, quote, get over it defense. But from former Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, she's the only justice in the Bush versus Gore majority who has publicly expressed misgivings about the entire episode. Maybe the court should have said, we're not going to take it, goodbye. And that's exactly what the court should have said. We're not going to take it, goodbye. I got a short break coming up here, and that's a really good place to end it. What Sandra Day O'Connor, Sandy said, we're not going to take it, goodbye. The Constitution already tells you how to deal with those kinds of disputes. The Supreme Court should not assert jurisdiction in a case that's really non-justiciable. End of lesson. Take a short break, and I'm going to come back to a caller who really wants to make his mark.
We all need to fight COVID-19, and we need all the weapons we can get to beat it. Your smartphone can be one of the most powerful tools to battle this pandemic. The Guam COVID Alert Exposure Notification app can let you know if you've been exposed to someone who has the virus. Add your phone to the COVID fight by going to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download it from the App Store or Google Play now. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations, check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play or go to thepoint.gu.
Boy, that's some long bumper music there, Jose. Okay, next on the card is the losers. But before I get to that, I have a caller who wants to make his mark on Tall Tales. Afternoon, Mark.
Good morning, Judge. Or actually, good afternoon. Good morning somewhere else, but good afternoon.
For sure.
Hey, I just had a question for you since we're talking about court decisions when it comes to, the presidential race and ballots and voting. There was a western state. I don't remember. I remember reading about it. I don't remember which one it was. It may have been California. It may have been another state, Arizona, where they were talking about how when absentee ballots came in, if the signature on the outside of the ballot did not match the one on the records for the Election Commission, they wanted to go ahead and accept it even though the signatures didn't match. And somehow in the court that was accepted. What's your opinion on that?
Well, starting out at the real basic is this. I don't like mail-in voting. I want to see people get off their butts and go down to the polls and mark their ballots. But we really got stuck with mail-in voting, and I'm afraid, because of the virus, and I'm afraid it's not going to go away. But the theory on examination of ballots is that if you can discern the intent of the voter, then even if he doesn't, they don't comply with all the niceties, the ballots still count. But I don't think you get to that point when you're talking about signatures on what's referred to as the confidential envelope and another signature. Now, I suppose the other signature comes from the registration documents in that particular state. So if the signature on the confidential envelope doesn't match, then it would seem to me that what we're talking about is a forgery, and that vote should not count.
Yeah, well, there was a court. It wasn't the Supreme Court, but there was a court that overruled the Republican Party and said, no, it doesn't matter if the signatures don't match. It will be accepted. And yeah, it just kind of had me scratching my head.
Well, I could give you what is probably the logical answer here, Mark. The proponents of the non-conforming the non-conforming signatures were probably Democrats. That kind of explains it.
Yes, they were.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
All right. Well, so are you keeping one eye out there on the stateside elections, or are you just going to run your show all about the Guam elections?
I'm not going to talk much about the stateside election today. I am, if you're watching, I am wearing my Trump shirt.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hey, the other thing I wanted to bring up is the other guy with my name that's older, but everybody calls him Paps. He got it right. He said it's going to be the incumbents and all the other incumbents that used to be in the legislature. But then he said plus Ken LG, and Ken LG didn't make it in.
Yeah.
So he got 14 of 15 right.
Yeah, he was close. and it used to be that we used to say that close only counts in hand grenades and horseshoes.
And horseshoes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we'll give Martinez, we'll give him credit for a good call here. And I've got that on my card here. All
right, sounds good.
Under the heading of losers, and it's not him.
All right, you have a good day, sir.
Thanks for calling, Mark. Okay, well, there's a caller who really made his mark on Tall Tales.
Just real quick, I saw an article talking about matching signatures on ballots and registration, and there was a court case in Pennsylvania that was recently decided against having to match it, and they cited nothing in state law speaks to that. So I think it depends on each state. It's not a federal.
Oh, yeah. Well,
state to state.
You know, people think that by mumbling that word that begins with F, they are stating a rule and showing their knowledge. But, you know, we talk in terms of federal elections, but actually they're state elections. The people that we send to Congress represent states, and they are elected in a process completely governed by state law. Every state is different. And every mechanism is different. And the point in that article that I just read, and the point in federalism is that certain things are left to the states where they must remain if you really value federalism. And sometimes the question is, well, where does your federalism take you? As an example, these so-called sanctuary cities and states where they say, we're not going to help the feds enforce immigration law. Well, I don't like the way that works, but I do believe in federalism, and that's what federalism is all about. So when it comes to running elections, that is a state function. And when the Supreme Court came along and said, well, you know, there's an equal protection argument here because they're only recounting some of the votes, not all of them. So they're denying some of the voters their right to equal protection of the law. It's just wrong, especially when you've got that procedure that I explained the other day, where if there is a contest on the 6th of January, Congress, the mechanism is for Congress to settle those disputes. So the Supreme Court, just as Sandy said, should have said, we don't have jurisdiction here. We're out of here. Goodbye. And by not doing that, they brought so much disrespect to themselves, causing me to say that Scalia, did a lot of good things, but that and his Second Amendment decision for someone who says, I'm an originalist, unless it gets in the way with me reaching the result that I really want to reach. And then I'm not so much of an originalist anymore. Let me see who's saying what on Facebook here. Maria Espinosa, right on point here. Maria says, your talk show could double as UOG credit covering the amendments. I'm learning so much. Just a collateral benefit of listening to Tall Tales, right?
Tuition free.
Tuition free. And you don't have to put up with a bunch of liberals to enroll in Tall Tales. Okay, now I'm going to turn to, well, wait a minute. I'm going to hang on until after the big halftime show here to go to losers. Let me see who else is on Facebook. Let's see here. Who we got here? We've got Pam Duvall and Lynn McAfee. Henry Manglogna might be a newcomer. Christian Dixon. John Ananich. John Ananich, who fought the good fight, came up a little short. We've got Rico Blancaflor, a regular customer. Sherry Iriarte, a regular customer. And Rico points out that Kelly Marsh Titano is out. Okay, let's break for that big halftime show, and I'll be back to talk about losers.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
This is a Fox News alert. Both candidates confident. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Just a handful of states yet to be called in Tuesday's election. President Trump says he's optimistic. He's expected to speak at the White House shortly. Fox's Jill Nato is live in Washington.
President Trump made some late-night waves on social media, posting, "We are up big, but they are trying to steal the election. We will never let them do it. Votes cannot be cast after the polls are closed." Twitter went on to flag that post as possibly misleading. Meanwhile, the election is still not over. Each state has to continue counting the popular vote, then certify the results in the days and even weeks after Election Day. Jack?
Jill, the big wins for the president on Tuesday: Texas, Florida, Ohio, plus 19 other states. Joe Biden sweeping the West Coast states, and the Fox News decision desk projecting he'll take Arizona as well. Biden addressed his supporters in Wilmington, Delaware.
It's going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted. Every ballot is counted.
The Fox News decision desk has projected Joe Biden will win the 2nd congressional district in Nebraska, one of only 2 states that splits their electoral college votes. That gives him 1 additional electoral college vote. In the Senate, the Democrats have a net gain so far of 1 seat. John Hickenlooper beating Republican Cory Gardner in Colorado. Mark Kelly projected to unseat Martha McSally in Arizona, although she says she is not yet conceding that race. But Alabama Democrat Doug Jones has lost his seat to Tommy Tuberville. Iowa's Joni Ernst, Kentucky's Mitch McConnell, South Carolina's Lindsey Graham, all defeating Republican challengers. Again, recapping, it may be tomorrow before we have further indication of who's winning the presidential race. America is listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch! That's just what we did with our new state-of-the-art mobile banking app as we celebrate 66 years of serving our island communities. It's loaded with a ton of new user-friendly features, including remote deposit capture. It's another way of saying you don't have to come to the bank to go to the bank. And if you want to come to the bank, we're happy to see your smiling face as long as you're wearing a mask. And we don't have long lines. Bank Pacific grows but branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Recapping this hour's Fox News alert, 6 states and 1 congressional district in Maine have yet to be called in Tuesday's election. Both of the candidates are expressing confidence. It is very likely we will not know who has won the presidential race until sometime Wednesday at the earliest. A burst pipe in the vote counting center in Atlanta, delaying the count in Fulton County, Georgia, and in Pennsylvania.
The votes have been cast. Now it's time to wait for the tally. There were long lines as polls opened Tuesday morning, and all those numbers may end up being an historic turnout for Pennsylvania. No small feat, especially since there's a pandemic also happening. That led more people to request mail-in ballots, and as of Tuesday morning, more than 2.5 million mail-in ballots had been received in the state. Some counties won't start counting absentee ballots until later today. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf has reminded the nation that the vote count in the Commonwealth will continue until all ballots are counted and will be accurate.
But I encourage all of us to take a deep breath and, as I've been saying, just be patient.
In Philadelphia, Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
Voters have made Oregon the first state in the union to decriminalize possession of certain street drugs, including cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine, and the therapeutic use of psychedelic mushrooms. Arizona and New Jersey voters approving the recreational use of marijuana. Joseph James D'Angelo, the 74-year-old former police officer who eluded authorities for years as the Golden State Killer, has arrived at a state prison in California to begin serving multiple life sentences for rapes and murders that terrorized much of California in the 70s and 80s. What was Hurricane Eta has been downgraded to a tropical storm over the mountains of Nicaragua. It is expected to swing across Guatemala and Belize and then re-strengthen as it re-enters the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. At least 3 people have been killed by the storm. Its projected path puts it close to South Florida by Sunday evening. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Did you know your smartphone is one of the most powerful tools in our fight against COVID-19? That's why we're bringing you the Guam COVID Alert Exposure Notification app. Developed by Google, Apple, and the PathCheck Foundation, the app works by letting you know if you've been exposed to someone who's positive. It's completely voluntary, and more importantly, it's anonymous. Add your phone to the COVID fight. Go to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download it from the App Store or Google Play now. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Okay, here we are, second half, Tall Tales, after another great halftime show that we've all come to appreciate so much, even though, because of the Wuhan virus, there's no one in the stands. So, as promised, I've got a list of losers here. I've got 12 losers that I'm going to go down and discuss. The losers are the separatists, the challengers, abortion, senators with cervixes, Ron McNinch, Action PAC, Progressive Democrat Group, Mary Torres, Rory, Legacy Candidates, Tina Rose Munya Barnes, and Election Day Chaos. Let's see, I got Senator Chris Duenas. Let me take Senator Chris Duenas, who is a winner. So I don't want to mix Senator Chris Duenas in here with the losers. Yeah, good afternoon, Senator-elect Chris Duenas.
Thank you, Senator Bob Klitzkie, Honorable Marine, Your Honor, and my favorite talk show host. I want to say thank you to the international radio listening audience. I know I've had some here that, I've had some misgivings about mistakes I've made in the past, and so I'll take another opportunity to say I'm not perfect and I made those mistakes, but I think you can hold out hope that I will definitely be somebody in this legislature going into the 36th. As we discussed, I already know my first bill that I'll be introducing, and that'll be straight towards transparency and accountability, requiring the governor to come down and extend any public emergency for the additional 30 days after the first 30 days, and that will require the legislature to do that, to approve of that, and to hear all the voices of the people of Guam. And so I'm going to work my way back to trying to earn the trust of those who've had difficulties, and for those who went ahead and I got some messages from some friends, and I'm going to name names, of course, that they did go ahead and give me a vote. Some of the Tall Tales posse. But their expectations are high, and I hope I can live up to it. And maybe with your guidance, Bob, and your constant being on my tail, we'll do this together.
I'll do it, Chris.
Bob, I have a prediction on your earlier analysis of the decision. I'm watching this returns come in for President Trump, and I'm praying incessantly that he wins. It looks very close, and I think looks favorable. But I have a prediction: if Biden were to win, that Guam would become a state post-haste.
Well, we did discuss that on Tall Tales, and if the Democrats think that it's a safe Democrat state, it may very well happen. Now, of course, the separatists would see this as the horrible thing. Michael Bavacqua, if I ever get to his column, has said that it's not statehood that he said, it's the choice. We just want to make the choice. And I likened it to the time that I took the real Joe Cruz over to McDonald's, because he said he wanted to order from the menu. So when he got over there, he looked at the menu and he said, there are 3 things on here that look pretty good. I said, which one are you going to order, real Joe Cruz? He says, I'm not going to order any of them. I just want the ability to make the choice.
Bob, I was in a forum, and I don't know why. Maybe the moderator knew this, but asked me that direct question in one of the forums of, was I insulted by President Trump's assertion of denying Guam statehood? And I said, absolutely not. I said, it's important to understand things in context. And the context under which President Trump was speaking about that issue was based on the attempt at mischief within the national government, that when our ultra-left liberal Democrats, because I got a lot of great Democrat friends, and I've been known to work across the aisle on policy that makes sense. But when I talk about the ultra-uber left and those Marxists and the rest of their ilk, the bottom line is that type of mischief is not intended to help, the people of Guam, or to reach out to say that you're that important to us. It's to stack the deck for themselves, and I would say that's the bigger insult is to be used. But go ahead, Bob.
If the nationalists were insulted by that, if the separatists were insulted by it, think of how the people of Dobongan must have felt.
I knew the horn was coming. But yeah, so for me, it was that, look, the context, I don't take that as a diss from President Trump at all. As a matter of fact, I've said this in so many different forums, and one of the reasons in that forum, I said specifically, I'm not insulted by President Trump, and I'm voting for him, and I hope he wins, is that, when we talk about the President of the United States, it's about what we can get on Guam. Let's be honest with ourselves. And the fact of the matter is the top performer for Guam, in my opinion, right now has been President Trump. When that issue was taking off in Korea, he personally called our governor. He personally assured our governor that Korea and other countries in the region, to include China and everything else, would be making a huge mistake by ever thinking about messing with Guam, Hawaii, or anything within what they think is their range. When we look at a lot of the benefits that Guam is seeing from the issues with regard to COVID, President Trump has been the biggest deliverer from Guam, for Guam and for the nation, than any other president that I've seen in recent history. So, to simply try to simplify it that way, where President Trump was simply addressing the issue that Guam is being attempted to be used as a pawn, and maybe the Democrats want that first 4 electoral votes to come a day early for them. The bottom line is that I am a proponent of statehood. I know we've discussed this before. Well, that's a whole different discussion. But the fact of the matter is that I don't believe that was not a diss. It was President Trump saying, "Don't let those guys use you. You're better than that."
That's right. That's right, Chris. Well, once again, we're looking forward to what is Inauguration Day? January what? Do you know?
I believe it's the first Monday. No, first Monday, and So I don't have that date off the top of my head, but I know what Bill 1 is going to be.
Good for you, Chris. Good for you. Okay.
Bob, I once again want to say thank you. I know that you've held me accountable consistently in the past. I know you will again. But I also thank you for recognizing that those who are willing to see errors in their way and make an attempt to serve the people of Guam honorably once again, that you will tip your hat in that way, and that's the Christian in you. So thanks, Bob.
Well, go and sin no more, Chris.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so long, Chris. Yeah, Chris Duenas. Okay, now from a winner we turn to the losers. And as I mentioned, the separatists, the challengers, the abortion, senators with a cervix, Ron McNinch, Action PAC, PD, as you were, Progressive Democrat Group, Mary Torres, Rory, legacy candidates, Tina Rose Munya Barnes, Election Day chaos, and I just added Dobongan to the list.
Just want to welcome all the listeners on Dobongan right now.
The what?
All the listeners. We just opened up the market there.
Yeah, well, I expect a couple of calls from Dobongan at any minute here. Okay, starting out with separatists. The separatists lost big because of the 3 candidates who were on the ballot for Washington rep. 2 of them were separatists, or actually separatists or fellow travelers. That was Will Castro, but certainly Robert Underwood, who has been a separatist ever since, right? And he has made no bones about it in the past. Recently, he said, I'm for a free association with protection for voting rights, which suggested to me that he wants to try something like the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But I've pointed out on this program so many times, free association for us is a political will-o'-the-wisp. Free association contemplates a treaty relationship between two sovereigns. In order for Guam to enter into that relationship, it would have to become sovereign. In other words, independent. So when you say you're for free association, you're saying you're for independence. So Robert is a separatist, and he got drubbed. He really got the tar beat out of him in this election. Now, of course, people win elections and lose elections. Some are close, some are not so close. But if you were a handicapper and you looked at the two major candidates here, St. Nicholas and Underwood, you got St. Nicholas, who has a pretty full kit of scandal going into the election. He didn't come back here. He didn't come back here to do much campaigning. He didn't spend a whole lot of money on his campaign. And then you got Robert Underwood, who is a distinguished elder statesman, 5 terms in the U.S. Congress, president of the University of Guam. No scandal is touching Robert Underwood. So one would have thought that Underwood versus Nicholas was, you'd have to have 20 to 1 odds to put any money on St. Nicholas. So why could St. Nicholas beat Underwood so badly? Well, there are some things that are kind of obvious. Both Underwood and his wife are Gostungi, and Holben, Mike St. Nicholas. So a lot of folks are thinking, well, let's send a younger guy back there. And along the same lines, your success in the United States Congress in the House of Representatives is at least in part dependent on your seniority. So if you really want to play the game for the maximum number of tricks, send the same guy back there time after time after time. So, excuse me, not the same guy, the same person, so that they can build up seniority. Because the amount of seniority you have has an impact on what committees you're assigned to, etc. So Underwood at 73 is probably not going to build that much seniority. St. Nicholas, I don't think he was even 40, so he could build up a lot of seniority. But I think what really the distinction here is that when St. Nicholas was a senator, he introduced and got passed a resolution that was very favorable to the Marines relocating to Guam. He is not a nationalist. He is not a separatist. And when he was asked about self-determination, by the way, he doesn't buy into this sophistry that talks in terms of Chamorro's self-determination instead of independence. It's kind of like the difference between pro-abortion and freedom of choice. You don't want to come right out and say what it is you want. You want to dress it up a little bit and put some frosting on it so that people aren't scared by it. But St. Nicholas is not taken in by that, and he said, whatever is decided, everybody should get to vote, which of course is an unpardonable sin to the separatists who say, no, if you're only Chamorros because, they've been oppressed for so long. And, the whole identity politics rap. St. Nicholas didn't buy into that. So my analysis is that's why Underwood got drubbed, because the separatists are a small but vocal minority, but they don't speak for the people of Guam. They don't speak for the electorate, and neither does Robert Underwood. So Robert Underwood, I think, probably should cancel his reservations for a plane trip back to D.C., because I don't see how he can possibly make up the difference in voting. Let's see, what is it? It's really extreme.
It was over 10%.
Yeah, 13,000 to 9,300. And then it's kind of like my conversation with Chris about statehood for Debongan. If it's between Underwood and St. Nicholas going into a runoff, who would the Republicans more than likely vote for? Oh, and one other thing. Underwood had the whole Democrat establishment behind him. He had the governor and everybody else. So when it comes to time for the runoff, my suspicion is that the Republicans will vote for San Nicolas, if for no other reason than to create some chaos for the Democrats to have to deal with. You remember San Nicolas got on the outs with the Democrats because he wouldn't sign their loyalty pledge. and I guess it really came back to haunt him by not signing the Democrat loyalty pledge. He knocked off Madeline Berdallo, who is the most successful politician that we'll ever see in our lifetimes. And then he comes back and beats the heck out of Robert Underwood. So I think whatever is good for Michael San Nicolas is probably good for Republicans. So I don't see that Underwood has a chance of prevailing. That's the first reason that I say that the separatists were big-time losers on this. The other one is this. Only one incumbent didn't make it back. That was Kelly Marsh Titano. And who did Kelly Marsh Titano put on her payroll about 8 or 9 months ago? You remember that? None other than Michael Bavacqua. So my analysis is that Michael Bavacqua was not a lifesaver for Kelly Marsh Titano. He was an anchor, and he dragged her underwater. Because once again, Kelly Marsh Titano, in addition to being an environmental wacko, also is a panderer to, quote, Chamorro rights, and wants to be seen as a separatist. So by putting Bavacqua on her payroll, what she did was she put a target on her back. She didn't make it. Pito beat her. Pito Terlahi beat her. Who really, if you come right down to it, Chamorro si Pito na traditional na tauto si Pito.
The miracle baby.
Yeah. Okay, so the separatists, I think, were big-time losers in this election. Second losers are the challengers. It was an amazing thing that everyone who was elected was either an incumbent or had been an incumbent once before. So this time around, we've shown, and this is something that is new to Guam politics, ordinarily you lose once, you're out. Nobody makes a comeback. But we recycled Tina. We recycled, I can't say her name, the one whose name shall never pass our lips, both of whom were beaten and then came back and were elected again. And both of them were reelected this time. And we had Frank Blas and Tony Atta and Chris Duenas, all three of whom were beaten the last time they ran. Either for because they were members of WANPAT 1 or WANPAT 2. But they came back and won. And then Joanne Brown won. Joanne Brown, you recall, won the closest election in the history of the legislature by 2 or 3 votes when she beat Ben Pangilinan back for the 28th Guam legislature. So it was not a good election for challengers. Because it appeared that people would rather vote for incumbents than challengers. Now, of course, there were some anomalies with this election, and that is that because of the Wuhan virus, it was really difficult for people who hadn't established any kind of name ID to establish any name ID. And as I pointed out before, you don't wait until you file your papers to start. If you're going to be successful, you need to start a year before. And if that's true as a general principle, it was true in spades this time around. So with respect to the comeback kids, the 4 who had been in the legislature before, people at least knew who they were. And as I've pointed out before, they may not have liked those that got caught up in the WANPAT 10, but as I pointed out before, Voters would rather vote for somebody they don't like than vote for somebody they don't know. So challengers were the big losers this time around.
You predicted that also. You said that we just don't know these people, these new people at all.
Exactly.
And they're not going to get voted in.
They're not going to get voted in. It's a little more complicated than filing your papers and then tightly crossing your fingers, right? Okay. Now we got a winner on the line here, and it's unfortunate that the passing of Sean Connery has popped him up into such prominence, but I have on the line right now the most dangerous man in the room, and I suspect all of those folks who were elected to the legislature are shuddering in their boots right now, saying, you know who's on the line on Tall Tales? Good afternoon, R. Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Just came back from my last secret mission from outer Slabovia.
I think the folks in Debongan are waiting for you to come down there and do a secret mission there, Carl.
I think that's on my list somewhere. It's on my secret mission to-do list.
Okay.
You know, I advise anyone who is thinking of running for politics to somehow tap your brain, because you are a proven master of guerrilla politics. I mean, by guerrilla politics, I mean lean, low-cost running for office. You've proven it twice. You know, you had a very unconventional campaign. You didn't follow what everyone else was doing. You know, look at the 1980s playbook or whatever. You know, if I was running for office, you're the first one I would want to sit down with and pick your brain. But anyway, I just want to make a couple of comments about Michael St. Nicholas. I voted for him again, almost entirely because of political status issue and the status he advocates, which you've talked about. And I've noticed a pattern on online on Facebook. I've seen many ads for Robert Underwood, and I've commented, you know, on some posts and I think ads or whatever, that he had been in office for 10 years, and I'd like to see a list of what exactly was accomplished during those 10 years. And I did this several times, you know, hoping that, well, they would move away from the smear campaign and start posting, well, what exactly, you know, did he do for the people of Guam? 10 years is a long time. And I never saw one. Maybe they did put out some ads like that, and I just might have missed it. I don't know.
Well, let's give him credit where credit is due. He named the time zone in which we are located Chamorro Standard Time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's not like we don't have a hard enough time telling people where we are now. You know, Mariana's Standard Time would have worked really, really well. But, of course, that doesn't have the same nationalist ring to it, does it? You know, like
No,
if, like for instance, if you were in Central Standard Time, they call that Illinois Standard, right? No.
Yeah. Exactly. But even if, you know, you're comparing Robert Underwood's record with Michael St. Nicholas's record in Congress, you still have to compare apples and apples. And I would ask, what exactly did he accomplish in the first 2 years? To be fair. And that was, we have to bear in mind that was accomplished with a smooth transition. Now, the feedback I've heard is that backstage there was a lot of monkey wrenches thrown into the transition of Michael St. Nicholas. I don't know why he hasn't made a bigger deal about it, but, you know, maybe he doesn't want to cry over spilled milk or something. But that's what the backstage feedback I've heard is that they weren't exactly rolling out the red carpet for him, you know, and helping him to make a smooth transition. Maybe you can correct me. You've got a much better network and grapevine than I do as far as those political matters, but I've heard it was really, there was a lot of efforts to try and hinder a transition. not aided by the fact that the former representative stayed on in another role in Washington, D.C. That did not help things.
True enough, Carl.
Yeah, Bob. Well, anyway, I'm glad for your feedback about that. I'm a little more comfortable that he is going to continue on as our representative, and that's my hope.
Okay, Carl. I'll let you get back to your secret mission, and good luck on your trip to Debongan.
All right. Thank you.
Seventh inning stretch coming up here in Tall Tales.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Okay, seventh inning stretch here from Wrigley Field. We come right back to the losers here on Guam, and I got a bunch of them. Let me see here. I got somebody in the green room here that I ought to take before I start with the next loser. Let me see who we got. It's Another Joe. Okay, Another Joe. Good afternoon, Another Joe.
Okay, Bob. So it's going to be really interesting to see how long it takes for the new 36 Guam legislature to start plugging out those bills that, especially the Republican side, they promised that they would start introducing, and with a gain of 2 seats in the 36 Guam legislature. The theory is they would have a better chance of being heard, to actually have a voice and represent the people.
Well, it isn't, Another Joe, it isn't that they haven't had a voice up until now. It's just that they don't want to use it. They've got a self-imposed gag rule that they don't want to speak out. I give you the Bob and Ray resolution. Jim Moylan never even talked about it, much less introduce it. So go ahead, Another Joe.
No, I agree with you. That's what I'm saying is you introduce new Republicans, and I'm trying to think here. I think it's 3 new Republicans at least, and in theory, one of those new Republicans is going to introduce either a bill or a resolution to that effect, addressing the issue of executive orders. Possible, the perspective of the overreach of the executive branch. So it's going to be interesting to see how long it takes for that bill to be introduced, and the way that they will vote on that bill. I don't know how long it takes for them to vote on a new speaker. Is that usually handled within the first month?
Well, that's usually handled before the legislature is sworn in. You know, the majority party repairs to a smoke-filled room, and they figure out who the speaker and the other officers are going to be, who gets what committee, et cetera, and go through all of that before they're sworn in, so that the day they're sworn in, they elect the speaker, the vice speaker, the secretary, et cetera.
And that happens in January.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be very interesting. It's like they've been saying in the media, the Republican Party has the ability to be kingmakers, right? Deciding who to throw their votes behind with this runoff election for the delegate to Congress, and possibly to whoever the new speaker is, right? Whoever the options are. I'm presuming that Tina Munoz Barnes is going to still want to keep keep that position, but I'm guessing that there's going to be other ideas.
Well, number 10 on my list of losers is Tina Rose Munoz Barnes, so I'll be talking about that when I get to that point, another Joe.
Okay, so I don't want to take too much of your time. I just want to. I'm glad that you're going to bring that up. And hopefully it all works out well, so that people have more. Well, like you said, they could have had something to say with the resolution, but hopefully now there's I don't know, more or less wiggle room, so to speak, which would allow for people to not take a less restricted stance, or to have more perspectives and stances, so that that the issue of executive overreach will have a better chance of being addressed in some fashion. But I'll just keep listening, Uncle Bob, and it should be very interesting, educational, and entertaining. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome, another Joe. I got to type out this message here. Wait a minute. Okay, so going back to my list of losers here, this was a tough election for challengers. And there may be several reasons for it. Certainly the Wuhan virus played into it. The lack of desire on behalf of the challengers certainly played a heavy-duty role. I went down the list, and some of the folks on this list here: Franklin Mano, David Duenas, Dominic Hernandez, Don Ed Kalani. I don't know what they think it takes to get elected other than filing your papers. But if you're a challenger, you have to establish yourself probably starting a year before the election. And I mentioned how to go about doing it: testify at public hearings, write letters to the editor, call talk shows. Sit down and write yourself a paragraph of why you want to be a senator. And if you find yourself saying, because I want to help the people, get a knife and cut off your hand, because that is not a reason to do anything. Anyhow, that could be part of it. Now, if the challengers, no challenger made it this time, so the other losers here are the people, because there is going to be at least an understood sense of comfort for everybody who got reelected. The incumbents that got reelected must be saying, well, I know they really criticized us, but I got reelected, so I guess I must have done something right. And for the challengers, well, maybe I lost my last election, but I guess I'm okay. So competition brings out the best in everyone. And the ideal situation where we'd have a turnover of 3 or 4 people every time we elect senators, so that every senator would know, geez, there are people on my tail here. I better perform or I'm going to be out. I'm not going to be reelected. So that's it for challengers. Next on my list of losers are senators with cervixes. And you may have forgotten, but I guess it's been about 6 weeks ago, I mentioned on Tall Tales that CNN ran a story about a vaccination for cervical cancer. And, they laid it out, they explained it, what a good deal it is, what it prevents, etc. And then their way of plugging it was to say that, this vaccine is really good, and so that any person with a cervix ought to get the vaccination. And of course, Fox News picked this up and said, couldn't we just say women? But of course we can't. Not in the woke 21st century, because a transgender advocate would tell you that women, that you don't have to be a woman to have a cervix. You could be someone who was born with male plumbing, but deep in your heart, I mean really deep in your heart, you felt like a woman. And that's enough. That makes you a woman. It kind of reminds me of the old light bulb joke. You remember the old light bulb jokes, Jose? How many this, that, or the other thing does it take to screw in a light bulb? You remember those?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. 1 to hold the light bulb, 3 to turn the ladder, that kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, well, you know how many psychotherapists it takes to screw in a light bulb?
How many?
Just one, but the light bulb has to really want to change. and it's that same theory here, that allows you to disregard human anatomy and biology and say, well, you don't have to be a woman to have a cervix. There are people that have cervixes that started out with male plumbing. So that's why I list these senators with cervixes. So we used to have only 5 people in the legislature that did not have cervixes. Now we have 7 of those unfortunates that do not have cervixes. So it's 8 with cervixes, 7 without. In other words, we went from 10 women, which was a source of, I think, the first 3 weeks after the election where the 35th was seated, the only comments that you would hear from anybody about the new legislature were like this. Ooh. Ah. We were so 10 women. Wow. We're really going to see some performance now. Well, now we're down to 8 women, 8 people with cervixes, and 7 men. So the people with cervixes were a loser. They lost a couple of seats. Next loser here is Ron McNinch. Ron McNinch is he's both a pollster and a prognosticator. And there's quite a difference between a pollster and a prognosticator. A pollster is one who says he develops a model that has certain statistical aspects to it. He develops a model, and he goes out and surveys the people in that model, and by coming to results with that mathematical analysis of those results, he can tell you, they can tell you who will win the next election. That's what a pollster does. A prognosticator doesn't go through that. A prognosticator looks at the data, the news, etc. Perhaps if there's a dead pig around, looks at the entrails of the pig or whatever, and comes out and says, I predict that this person or these people will win the election. So McNinch purports to be both a pollster and a prognosticator. Well, he hasn't been doing much prognostication here because of the virus, I suppose. It's pretty hard. He uses his students to go out and gather data. So he set himself up as a prognosticator. And he was on Tall Tales on Monday, and he said, Democrats will hold a majority, 10-5 or 9-6. That's what he said. A little different from 8-7, which means just barely holding on to it. He also said Robert Underwood. Robert Underwood. And of course, he was wrong on both those things, so he kind of loses out as a prognosticator on that one. Now, I contrast him with our own prognosticator here, whose name is Martinez. And Martinez, as far as the senators were concerned, was very, very close. He called 12 of the 14. Yeah, pretty good, 12 of the 14. He didn't call Underwood either. And my analysis of the two analyzers is that neither one of them perhaps were quite as in tune with the anti-separatist feeling that I am, because I talk about it all the time. So Robert, of course, was drubbed, and Martinez didn't call that. But Ron McNinch was, as a prognosticator, might want to stick to polling. Okay, next on my list of losers here is Action Pack. Yeah, this was a group of 5 civic organizations, the Woke Women's Chamber of Commerce, the Real Chamber of Commerce, the Realtors, and I can't remember who else, but 5 different organizations. They obviously spent a lot of money, and they endorsed candidates. They spent a lot of money. There was a lot of copy out there, a lot of pictures, a lot of color, etc., a lot of TV ads, a lot of stuff online, etc. And you know how many challengers they were able to get into the legislature? 0. None. So in other words, the people that got elected to the legislature owe nothing to Action Pack, because Action Pack obviously had no impact on the election whatsoever. Okay, let's take, wow, it's up to home stretch time already, huh? Wow, I still got so many losers to go. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Contact tracing is key to containing COVID-19. That's why we're introducing the Guam COVID Alert app. According to Oxford University, for every 100 to 200 downloads of this app, 100 infections can be prevented and 1 life can be saved. Help save a life. Go to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download the app from the App Store or Google Play now. Add your phone to the COVID fight. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Yeah, so it turned out that Action Pack spent a lot of money and apparently had no influence whatsoever on the election. And some of the issues that they favored, I favor also, so it's unfortunate. But, you know, sometimes you're better off going to the gun rack and looking for that 30-30.
They never did publish any of the answers from the surveys, did they?
No, they didn't. Yeah.
That might not have helped them.
And they endorsed too many people. They endorsed people.
16 or 17?
The realtors endorsed 16.
Okay.
Yeah. And some I couldn't. Tina Rose Munya Barnes is an example they endorsed. I couldn't understand that one. Okay, next I've got the Progressive Democrat group on my list of losers here. And the Progressive Democrat group endorsed 7 people. Tops on the Progressive Democrats list was a certain Chris Carrillo. And Chris Carrillo was way, way out of the money. He was down there 26th. So it just shows you the power of the Progressive Democrats.
He went from the top to...
Yeah, number 1 on their list, 26 on the card. Okay, I've got our Fred on the line. Good afternoon, our Fred.
Hi, RAG. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, sorry, getting disconnected. But, you know, with all the election and Democrats, Republicans, and all that, but no one's addressing the big white elephant in the room, or maybe forgot about it, which is that the island is still on a lockdown, shutdown, stay-at-home order, which is really damaging our economy. People are still either out of a job or low in their hours to work, reduced hours. Businesses are struggling. I mean, if the government is or Adelup is looking at Ross and Kmart or Payless supermarkets as being busy and as a indicator that everything is fine, that's totally false. Because grocery stores and some essential places, yeah, will be busy, but all other businesses are struggling, and I don't see that being addressed. And we had one more death today, so does that mean because we have one more death today that we need to keep the island continuously in lockdown?
It means that that's what's going to happen until some brave senator introduces the Bob and Ray resolution and gets it through the passage. That's what's going to save us. And of course,
I think what's killing.
Go ahead, Fred.
I think what's killing this island or killing the people is obesity and gout, diabetes, and high blood pressure and heart disease and cancer. That's what's killing the island.
Spam has killed more people than Wuhan virus ever will.
And I'll tell you something. You will not find Spam in a Ralph's in the U.S. mainland or luncheon meat because it's unhealthy and bad for you.
Yep.
So the governor needs to address this lockdown, stay-at-home, safer order because businesses have rents to pay.
Well, she has addressed it, Fred. Just the other day, somebody said to her, Governor, a lot of people are really complaining about this lockdown. What do you want to do? And the governor said, guess what?
What?
Off with their heads.
Well, governor needs to understand that commercial businesses have commercial rents to pay, which are not being forgiven, and residential landlords have rents that need to be paid, which tenants are not paying. And this is just absurd going into 9 months and another declaration till November 29, which is still a whole month. This needs to stop like tomorrow.
I agree, our
Fred.
Fred.
Matter. So I hope you can address it and put the urgency to these senators that are out there.
I'll keep pounding away. Yeah,
yes,
okay, our
please.
Fred. Thanks
Please, thank you.
Thanks for calling. Okay, and let's see, I got about 5 more minutes here. I got Kellis on the line. Good afternoon, Kellis.
Good afternoon, Judge. So I just heard it, what is causing all these deaths? Spam.
Yeah.
So during the lockdown, everyone is eating more spam.
That's right.
So that's it. If we get out of the lockdown, then we'll stop eating the spam.
Yeah.
I'm going home to make me a spam and egg sandwich right now.
There you go.
That was it.
Okay.
Have a good day, Judge.
Thanks for calling, Kellis. You know, the ironic thing about spam, is people like it, but there's also this historical attachment to it. And that is that, when the Marines came in and liberated Guam, spam, spiced ham, that's where spam came from. in a can was something that was very transportable. You could put it on the shelf for years. It doesn't spoil, etc. So a lot of folks here on the island didn't know Spam at all. And at the end of the war, you know, with liberation came Spam. So it has this kind of celebratory aspect to it, so that old folks, wealthy, well-to-do older folks who could afford T-bone steak every morning would rather have Spam and eggs. And, of course, that gets passed on down to the younger folks. But, you know, a diet that's high in fat, high in sugar, etc., diabetes, high blood pressure, gout, on and on and on. And we talk about Wuhan virus and comorbidities. Much of it comes from a sedentary lifestyle and a diet that's really kind of out of control.
That's the thing about life. We're not going to get out of it alive.
No matter what, you're not going to get out of it alive. Yeah, and then one more thing, you know, before the war, everybody walked, everybody worked. You know, Guam was primarily an agrarian society. You look at the pictures from the old pre-war pictures, you don't see anybody who's dummock in those pictures. And occasionally you'd go for a big feast, you know, for a wedding or something like that, or a village fiesta. But you might have to walk 10 miles round trip to get there and chow down. But when the war came along, after the war, we went from a subsistence economy to a money economy with all kinds of diseases of civilization coming in packages, and that's where we are now. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my list of losers tomorrow. I've got Mary Torres is the next loser that I'll be talking about. So I'll see you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
This is a Fox News alert. He says they'll try to steal it. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. A handful of key states yet to be called in Tuesday's election. President Trump confident but wary. Speaking a short time ago at the White House, Fox's Jill Nato is live in Washington.
President Trump giving what he calls his latest news conference ever, a few minutes after 2 a.m. Washington time. The president says he's convinced he's winning the election, and he can't understand why the calls aren't being made on those crucial states already.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country.
At the moment, Fox News says Democrat Joe Biden has 238 electoral votes. President Trump's running behind with 213 as they battle to get to 270. And it may be days, even weeks, before those votes are all counted and certified. Jack?